A charming farm is illuminated by the early sun's warm rays as they stretch across the serene Greystone Valley fields. This farm, which was tucked away in the center and owned by a modest farmer called Eli Turner, had seen better days because Ellis's humble living was barely sustained by the land, which had been a symbol of riches for generations. As his debts mounted and crops failing, Eli was on the verge of despair after years of fighting to keep the farm running. His once vibrant fields were now subsisting on a few rows of copse and a small flock of hens. His wife had died years before, and he was burdened with the legacy of his family and overrun with weeds. Earlier, on a cold spring morning, Eli found solace solely in the mundane task of caring for his farm. As he started his routine checks on his poultry, he noticed something near the far end of the field. A faint, intrigued, he approached his reflection on the dew-covered grass. He discovered himself frozen in place, resting in a tiny dip in the ground with his boots sinking slightly into the SS. Field was a huge egg, almost 3 times larger than any chicken egg I had ever seen, with a pale shell. Eli briefly pondered whether it was some sort of iridescent white with delicate swirling patterns that appeared almost unearthly. Quite complex hoax, but he was persuaded when he bent down and touched the egg and felt the warmth it gave off. Otherwise, what sort of bird would lay such an egg? He whispered, his rough fingertips just grazing the surface of his. His initial reaction was to be cautious. Could it be the work of a ferocious predator? But his curiosity quickly overcome him. Eli carefully carried the egg back to the farmhouse and set it in a straw-lined improvised nest. Didn't know what kind of creature was within, but he had a gut feeling that this finding might be the clue he'd been looking for. He was waiting for an opportunity to change his life, but he had no idea that the egg's arrival would start a series of events that would permanently alter his life. The enormous egg became the focal point of Eli Turner's small house, which was tucked away in A. There was a soft warmth emanating from the straw-enclosed kitchen area that Eli couldn't get rid of. He started his days like clockwork, but the sensation that this egg was exceptional left him with more questions than answers. Using an old heat bulb he had found out of his barn to check on the egg and regulate the warmth, he muttered to himself about the ostriches weren't indigenous to the region, therefore it's possible that it was an ostrich that didn't make sense. One in Greystone Valley. Perhaps some of the local children are pulling a practical joke, but how would they even successfully lay such an egg without his knowledge? His interest soon shifted. He quizzed local farmers and Oldtimers about obsession at the feed store regarding the egg in the hopes that someone could explain it, as I've never heard of anything similar. An old man shook his head and remarked, "If you're lucky, it's worth something. If you're unfortunate, but I have a weapon close by in case." Eli laughs apprehensively, but the word stuck in his mind. What kind of monster could emerge from an egg that big? He couldn't bring himself to throw away anything about the egg's feel, so he kept it in spite of the warnings. Significant one evening, Eli heard the crunch of tires on gravel as the sun was setting, and he looked out the window to witness a stranger's truck arrive in his driveway. A tall man wearing a jacket came out with his boots banging on the floor, and as he got closer to the farmhouse Eli Turner, the man inquired "I'm Dr. Ian Caldwell, a scientist, and I may be heard in a deep, serious voice through the." Eli paused, then nodded. "You found something unusual, Grapevine?" He reasoned that since he was traveling quickly in a tiny town, someone would eventually come and look around. He escorted the man inside, where Dr. Caldwell's gaze instantly focused on the egg. "My God," the biologist said. "Do you know what this might be?" Eli, squatting down to examine it, acknowledged that I was hoping you would inform me that Dr. Caldwell produced a tiny gadget. The heat being produced by scanning the egg's surface is abnormal, and these markings seem at. Eli scowled and said, "Fossils. What are you?" "They look a lot like patterns in fossils from millions of years ago." "I'm not claiming that." Dr. Caldwell paused, making his countenance inscrutable. anything for certain, but if this egg is what I believe it to be, you may possess something that hasn't existed for a very long time." The phrase stuck in my head. Eli's sense of amazement and delight vanished as the air struck him like a thunderclap. Over the next few weeks, Eli found himself becoming increasingly devoted to the idea that this might be the miracle he had been yearning for. He sat beside the enigmatic egg for hours, conversing with it as though it could hear him. Dr. Caldwell then arrived and conducted tests and made notes, but the biologist provided no conclusive replies. Eli saw something strange one morning while he was adjusting the heat lamp. He was surprised by a little vibration and leaned closer as the egg moved slightly and began to tap softly. There's a pounding sound coming from inside his heart. Dr. Caldwell claimed that the hatching process had begun when Eli called him. Eli could. He sat by the egg day and night, scarcely sleeping as the faint, unable to control his excitement. The shell started to fracture late one night as the tapping got louder, making a sound like Ellis's breath seized in his throat as the egg broke open due to the shattered glass. A unique creature with large, perceptive eyes and a tiny, slippery, shimmering body appeared. Eyes peered up at him, revealing a delicate layer of downy feathers and claws. Strong Dr. Caldwell, who had come right away when the egg began to hatch, marveled. "This isn't possible. What is it?" Dr. Caldwell bent down and questioned Eli in a voice that was almost audible above a whisper. Wide with wonder, "It appears to be a dinosaur species, possibly a theropod, but it is tiny, like a bird, and I have never seen anything like it." Eli was shocked. In his kitchen, he heard a dinosaur make a faint chirping sound. Without thinking, Eli extended his hand to grasp the air with its little claws. Warmth leaking into his skin as the creature nuzzled into his palm. "Bonding with you," Dr. Caldwell stated that, in its opinion, "you're the first thing it saw when it hatched." Ellis, its parent, held the little one in his arms as his heart grew with pride and duty, marveling at the creature's strength and fragility in his grasp at that precise time. As sunshine poured through the kitchen window the following morning, the hatchling realized that his life would never be the same. He started to investigate its surroundings while clumsily waddling on its small legs. Its feathery down shimmered as it examined everything, from Ellis's boots to the table's edge, chirping inquisitively. Dr. Caldwell later returned, and Eli couldn't help but smile at its naive wonder in the light. Eli started off his tone solemnly that afternoon while carrying multiple boxes of equipment. "We must speak. I have forwarded some initial data to a few reliable colleagues, and their answers have been." Eli furrowed his brow in anxiety as he looked at the hatchling, which was now sitting, dangerously perched on a chair, pecking at the table's leg. "How Dr." Setting his tools aside, Caldwell took out a tablet that displayed a number of charts, and I was able to study this organism, whatever it is, using pictures based on the egg structure and some genetic material. Possesses characteristics similar to those of prehistoric theropod dinosaurs. But here's the catch. Eli said, "It's not just prehistoric," with a shiver running across his spine. "What do you mean?" Caldwell paused, carefully selecting his words. "There is evidence of genetic manipulation. This creature was created by someone or something. And it's not just a dinosaur, it's a hybrid," you said, striking Eli like a hammer. Caldwell acknowledged that someone made this, but it clarifies why. The creator of the egg may have been testing it, or worse, attempting to conceal it, which is why it landed up on your farm. They might come seeking for it now that it's hatched. Ellis's protective instincts immediately came into play. Saw the hatchling, which was now chirping joyfully as it attempted to scale the counter. No one was taking this seriously. "You staying here with me, little guy?" Dr. Caldwell nodded through his countenance was grim. "I know how you feel, Eli, but this is more significant than. If this creature were created, it may be dangerous for both of us." Over the following few days, the hatchling's behavior improved, not just for it, but also for us. Although it was primarily lighthearted and loving, there were times when it became more bizarre. One afternoon, Eli discovered it peering out the window as instincts seemed to take control. Window, its feathers bristling, its small body stiff, it released a deep guttural sound. Growl, a completely different sound that made Ella shudder. "What's wrong with you, little guy?" he inquired, tentatively approaching, and the hatchling relaxed as soon as Eli put a hand on its back. But the thing that stayed with him was that the creature was feeling something that Eli wasn't able to. As he was getting ready for bed, he heard rustling outside and grabbed a flashlight. He stepped out onto the porch and looked around the pitch-black fields, initially seeing nothing but shifting grass. But suddenly he noticed a dark figure approaching the edge of his property. Eli yelled, his voice piercing the darkness as the figure. Ellis briefly hesitated before scurrying out of view, his heart pounding as he rushed back inside, closing the doors and wondering what was going on with the hatchling, which was now curled up in a makeshift nest in the living room. He grumbled as his mind raced with potential outcomes. The following morning, Dr. Caldwell came with news. I believe it was Eli. I compared some of the hatchling's genetic markers with information from a private source since we had a lead. Unfortunately, it appears that the technology used to splice the DNA is not accessible to the general population. Eli scowled. You're saying this isn't? Did this have resources? Caldwell stated that this is a huge problem that is being played with by some rogue scientists. It's possible that the shadow you saw last night was someone searching for the monster or egg that the two guys had agreed to set up. Cameras throughout the farm to keep an eye out for any odd activity when the hatchling kept growing at an incredible rate. In just 1 week, its size had doubled, its feathers had darkened, and it was taking on. Its claws sharpened, and its movements became more accurate on an iridescent sheen, almost. Despite the hatchling's quick growth, Eli and the creature developed a stronger bond, and the creature followed him everywhere, chirping joyfully, and it even began to respond when Eli spoke to it. After witnessing it expertly capture a moth in midair, Eli gave it the nickname Talon, which he remarked, I'm not sure where you came from, but the creature curled at his side one evening as they were sitting on the porch. However, since you are now a member of its family, it will always defend you, much like Eli. A black SUV arrived into his driveway one day, and he started to feel normal again. Ella's stomach fell when two guys in suits appeared in the afternoon, their faces formal and icy. They went to Mr. Turner's residence, and one of them shouted, "We're with you," while flashing a badge. According to reports from the Department of Wildlife and Environmental Affairs, there is a common animal on Ur. If we examine closely, Ellis's mind raced because he recognized these men weren't who. They asserted that their immaculate suits and polished shoes shouted government or worse, private contractors employed by. Eli apologized to whoever made Talon, saying in a casual manner, I don't know what you're talking about, ordinary cows and hens. The men looked at each other. We would still like to look around for public before the other one speaks. Safety Eli refused to back down. The men will want a warrant for that. Paused, letting their courteous exterior slip for a brief while. I'll be back soon. Ellis muttered that before heading out as the SUV vanished down the street. His heart thumped in his chest, knowing that whoever those men were, this was just the beginning. Eli knew he couldn't afford to wait for them to find what they were looking for, so they weren't going to stop until they did. He was startled by the men's return of their polished professionalism and felt compelled to defend Talon. Paced the living room while observing the hatchling, which was already growing more quickly than anyone had ever imagined. Talon was no. The delicate creature had discovered its vigilant eyes and its sharp claws, which clicked softly on the hardwood floor, followed Ellis everywhere. They'll return, Eli said to himself. And then, later that night, Dr. Caldwell arrived, and they won't be politely asking. Eli's grim demeanor, as he described the visit, supports our suspicions. These men are not from any legitimate wildlife, Caldwell added, massaging his temple. Agency that is probably associated with the person who designed Talon. So what should we do? I can't let them take him, Eli said in a desperate tone. Quell, his family, nodded in understanding of the emotional connection that had developed between Eli and the beast. We must conceal him, but more crucially, we must discover who is responsible. Telling the truth is the only way to keep Talon safe. Eli and Caldwell put in a lot of effort over the following few days to secure the farm. They added more cameras and strengthened the barn, creating a safe area for Talon to run around in. Caldwell also made contact with two reliable co-workers in the hopes of finding any information regarding the genetic engineering that went into Talon's creation, but Talon's growth does not appear to be stopping down. Now standing as tall as Ellis' knee, the hatchling's feathers gleamed with an almost unearthly sheen appeared to comprehend Ellis's words more than previously believed, and its movements were elegant yet strong. One afternoon, Talon Eli might have muttered, squatting to meet the beast's gaze. You must avoid being seen, okay? Those men are scary, and the thing is tilted. Eli couldn't help but notice the quiet chirp coming from its head, which sounded almost like acknowledgement. Despite the anxiety, Caldwell burst into the good boy's smile one evening. Eli, who was carrying a stack of papers and his tablet, remarked, I found something. He spread the materials on the kitchen table and pointed to a number of schematics with a voice that was both excited and worried. Using coded entries, Jura Labs, a biotech business, has been conducting covert experiments. They have been frequently exploiting distant areas for their studies involving hybrid animals, leaving them when they're finished. Talon's egg might have been a component of one of their. Eli leaned over the table to scan the papers throughout the experiments, and they simply left. It's worse than that if an experiment is conducted with these critters behind like waste. Quell sighed. Talon may have been a test, but they discard it because they think it's a failure or too dangerous. Ellis's fists clenched when the subject escaped or was purposefully concealed. And now they. Caldwell put his hand on Ellis' shoulder and said, I don't want him back. Oppose this, but we require additional evidence. If we can reveal what they have been doing, they will have. The quiet evenings on the farm grew infrequent as Eli had to respond to the public, and Caldwell stayed vigilant. The cameras detected movement every now and again. Although there was nothing conclusive, Eli couldn't get rid of the notion that they were being. But one evening as Eli was sitting on the porch, Talon abruptly bounded to his feet, feathers bristling. A low growl that Eli had never heard before reverberated from its throat. Eli muttered, What is it, boy? Before getting up to follow Talon's eyes. Moments later, a dim glimmer appeared in the tree line at the boundary of the land, where the creature's keen eyes were focused. Ellis's heart raced when he saw a flashlight appear and realized someone was intruding. Taking out his shotgun, he signaled Talon to remain motionless and moved stealthily in the direction of the light source. We can't go without that, one voice remarked in a quiet tone. Ellis's grip on the present shotgun intensified, indicating that the boss wants results. The intruders froze their headlights, illuminating their shocked expressions as they barked and emerged from the shadows. Wore unmarked, dark suits that were obviously professional. One of them put up his palms and smiled artificially. Eli hissed, Get off my land, farmer. We're just surveying the area. The man paused, staring at the shotgun aimed directly at his chest, before withdrawing. Well, I'll be back, one of them muttered as they vanished into the. Eli stood in the dark for a while, his hands trembling from the rush of excitement, until he eventually, when they got back to the house, Talon was standing by the door, its piercing eyes full of a strange comprehension that they refused to. Eli whispered as he ran a hand through his hair. Up, but neither am I. The creature appeared to sense the threat, even as Eli and Talon's relationship became stronger. Ellis's feelings, which were consoling in their own way, would nuzzle him when he was under stress and faithfully followed him everywhere on the property. Talon abruptly ran ahead as Eli fixed a fence on the other side of the property in the afternoon, its keen senses detecting up. Eli observed it halting close to a spot of dirt and scraping at the, "Hey, what have you found now?" Eli mumbled as he approached, startled. There, Talon discovered a little concealed camera and an odd metallic item. Spying on us, Eli became enraged and smashed the gadget beneath. As the days went by and the strain increased, Eli and Caldwell realized that his boot was determined to convey a message. Would probably return with stronger force, which they had diligently bolstered their defenses and collect proof against Jurolabs. While Talon kept developing, the grace and might of a predator have replaced its originally awkward motions. But even in the middle of despite the commotion, there were times when Eli and Talon would sit on the porch and watch the sunset. While pondering what was ahead, he was resolved to face whatever came next. The finding of the concealed camera strengthened Ellis' desire to defend the animal that had become his family, but it also complex issues, and whomever was seeing them wasn't only intruding, they were gathering. Caldwell recommended bringing the camera to a reliable source in order to gather information for a more coordinated approach. Eli was initially hesitant because there was someone in town who could track down its source and identify the person responsible for the spying. They would be safer if fewer people were aware of Talon, but Call insisted. Eli, if this becomes public, Jurolabs or whoever there will be our allies. Eli grudgingly agreed to back off, and Caldwell drove the following morning, leaving Talon and Eli alone on the farm as they went into town. It was a calm day, the kind that made the impending danger appear nearly unreal. Eli spent the morning caring for his constant growing companion. His crops had turned into his shadow. While Eli was preparing dinner that night, there was constant observation and alertness. He froze as he heard a knock on the door, his thoughts returning to the trespassers, and he grabbed his shotgun. Carefully approaching, he peed through the window and was shocked to see that it wasn't one. One of the males from earlier was a young lady in her mid-20s who wore casual, yet businesslike attire. Close. Eli cracked the door open, revealing the shotgun. "Who are you?" The woman raised her hands in a peace sign, saying, "What do you want?" I'm Dr. Vanessa Mercer, and I'm not here because I work for a conservation group." Eli briefly examined her before I warned him not to hurt you. Grudgingly allowed her inside, and after entering, Vanessa looked around anxiously as though, "You're in danger because you're anticipating someone to break in at any second," she said. Speaking quietly, the folks who are pursuing that thing want to stop because they don't give a damn. How do you know about laws or ethics when they only care about their experiments? Vanessa hesitated when Eli insisted that he tighten his hold on the shotgun. I sighed since I had previously worked for Jurolabs, but I quit after seeing what they were working on a project with Talon, so he's not like anything else. Vanessa, they've been together for years and will stop at nothing to win him back. Outlined how Jurolabs had been combining DNA from various sources in their advanced genetic engineering experiments, species to produce hybrid creatures with improved characteristics, and Talon, she disclosed, was among. One of their most ambitious creations is a robust hybrid of an ancient reptile and a bird of prey. And quite clever, they were meant to harm the eggs, Vanessa stated in her voice, burdened with remorse. But I believe one of the scientists sneaked them away. Ellis likely got Talon here, since they couldn't bring themselves to let them be destroyed. The creature he had fallen in love with was unique, not merely uncommon. "Why are you?" He asked me for help. and it was clear that he had suspicions because what they were doing was. However, Vanessa vehemently retorted that Talon should not be imprisoned and should be allowed to live freely. Land, and because I owe it to him, she hesitated and dropped her gaze. Help constructing Vanessa offered to assist Eli when her arrival brought clarity and problems. Safeguard Talon, but it wouldn't be simple because Jora Labs possessed resources that went much beyond their own, and it was only a question of time until they came back. We require proof, Vanessa stated. They can't pursue you without endangering the public if we can reveal what they're doing. Reaction later that night. Caldwell reappeared, his expression grim. The camera had brought into town had been linked to a distributor that corporate security frequently uses. He confirmed that the three of them sat. Therefore, it's unquestionably related to Jora. Developing a strategy at the kitchen table, Vanessa recommended contacting a journalist she trusted who had. Caldwell would keep investigating Jora's actions in light of previously revealed business malfeasance, while Eli would concentrate on protecting and concealing Talon as the days went by. In an attempt to increase his growth and intelligence, he began imitating some of Ella's actions, such opening, getting tools from the barn, and opening doors. His keen senses also made him a great watchdog, frequently warning Eli about. Eli went Talon one evening to check the property for any strange behavior. The monster stayed nearby, its keen eyes searching the field as he took a stroll along its edge in the hopes of clearing his head. Eli couldn't help but marvel at Talon's progress as they strolled along horizon. What began as a delicate, unhatched egg transformed into a gorgeous, almost legendary creature that is more than just a pet. Eli remarked, gently caressing your family's dazzling feathers with talons. When the farm was attacked one night, Eli's newly discovered feeling of purpose was destroyed. Talons piercing. He screamed, heard glass shattering, grabbed his shotgun, and ran. When two disguised intruders were discovered downstairs in the living room, Eli yelled, "Stay back." One of the men pushed forward with a weapon aimed at them, but before Eli could respond, Talon swooped down from with its talons extended. The beast screamed loudly as it charged at the intruder. The second man paused, obviously disturbed by the sight of the savage, and knocked him down. Eli, a hybrid, seized the opportunity and fired a warning shot into the ceiling, yelling for the men to leave. Leaving a trail of shattered glass and flipped furniture in his wake, Eli stood in the debris. His Talon landed next to him, his feathers ruffled, but otherwise his heart thumping. "Boy," Eli murmured, his voice trembling with a mixture of dread and relief. "Unharmed. You saved me." Eli was shaken by the incident, but it also made him realize that we are all in this together. Strengthened his resolve, and realized that Talon was now an essential component of Ellis. Not just a creature to be protected. Life a companion, a protector, an array of hope. But the event brought up new. Eli and Vanessa Caldwell regrouped the following in response to inquiries over the extent Jora Labs will go to in order to reclaim Talon. Eli's nerves were strained in the morning, but their resolve was greater than ever. Observed that the farm was starting to change unexpectedly as a result of Talon's presence. The hybrid monster wasn't only protective and surprisingly perceptive. Talon began assisting with tasks in his own special manner, using his strong claws to drag tools over the field and ward off dangerous pests. His intellect was evident as he guided wandering livestock back into the enclosures and even tended to the crops. Eli was astounded by Talon's easy transition to farm life, which Caldwell observed in. When Talon discovered a herd of sheep that had strayed too far one afternoon, he said, "Never seen anything like it," as if he understood what you were saying. Eli answered proudly. Vanessa nodded her look. "He's not just any animal. He's different. Melancholy, which is precisely why they do everything in their can to get him back. Talon stands for Jorah wants to control power and profit at all costs. But because he is now free, we must preserve it that way. Later that night, Vanessa provided further details with Eli as she assisted him in boarding up the damaged windows from the attack. Although she acknowledged that I didn't always agree with Jorah Lab's approach, I remained involved with them. I couldn't stay because I believed I could change things from the inside out when I witnessed what they were doing to beings like Talon. Eli stopped leaning on his hammer, saying, "Any further, you're taking a big risk by helping." I think Talon is the reason Vanessa was hesitant to respond. He is more than merely an experiment. He is evidence that humanity is capable of producing incredible things without destroying them. Perhaps by protecting him, we can demonstrate to the world that Ellis Gaze can be improved. Made his family softer, and now I don't give a damn about what they want. Talon isn't going anywhere. Eli was affected by the circumstances no matter where they stood together. The farm was his source of income, yet it was turning into a battleground. And while he was worried for Talon's safety, he was much more afraid of losing the being who, the following morning, gave Eli a renewed sense of purpose in life. He took the creature to the farthest field where the wheat was in order to gauge Talon's level of understanding. Eli held up a stick and threw it into the air, looking tall and golden in the morning light. "Go ahead, boy." Talon's bright eyes darted between Eli and the stick as he tilted his head to retrieve it. His strong legs propelled him across the field quickly after a little pause, and he returned a few moments later. Eli grinned and clapped his hands after carefully clenching the stick in his beak. "Good boy," he said softly, leaning his head. "You're full of surprises, aren't you?" For a brief time, all of Ella's worries vanished as he pressed against her shoulder in a loving gesture. This wasn't just the lab-created creature was a living, breathing entity with feelings, impulses, and the ability to connect. It rivaled any human in how much Eli treasured his relationship with Talon, and the mystery that surrounded him started to wear thin. He couldn't afford to let anybody else on the property, not even. Questions concerning his abrupt withdrawal began to circulate among his closest neighbors, and Eli discovered. One afternoon, Caldwell found himself avoiding calls and avoiding town completely. "Eli, you cannot continue to hide in concealment forever. People will begin to." Eli shot back if they discovered that I was asking questions and did what I had to do. "I get that Talon is over Caldwell, but isolating oneself isn't the..." Vanessa added. "You need allies and people you can trust." He's right. We need more than just the three of us to confront Jorah. We must demonstrate to the world what Talon symbolizes before they can distort the story. Eli thought over what they said, but was still wary about trusting others. Meant putting Talon's safety at danger. Could he accept that risk that evening when the three, as they sat around the kitchen table planning, Talon growled softly from his position at the back door. "What is it, boy?" Eli inquired, his sharp eyes focused on the darkness outside while his feathers fluttered. Vanessa carefully reached for a flashlight, and as the three of them entered the porch, the beam of light pierced the tire tracks were discovered at night, indicating that someone had been at the barn. Eli clenched his fists and watched us while Caldwell mumbled. His jaw stiffening, Vanessa put her hand on his and said, "Give them one if they want to fight well. However, we must exercise caution because Eli Talon's survival depends on it." Eli's realization that keeping Talon a secret was crucial came about as a result of the intrusion. It wasn't only about defending the animal. It was also about opposing a system that aimed to take advantage of and destroy for profit. Talon's presence served as a reminder that life was resilient, and as the night wore on, Eli, Vanessa, and Caldwell confirmed their intended freedom. Their strategy: they would obtain proof of Jenora's illicit actions and get in touch with reliable allies who may provide assistance. Revealing the truth was a dangerous step, but it was the only way to guarantee Talon's. Talon watched them in the darkness, his bright, eyes full of, knowing that they would confront any obstacles together the morning after finding the tire. Tracks Eli. I awoke with a persistent feeling of worry Talon's intuition had been right. Prior to this, it was evident from the surveillance information that Jora Labs was closing in, and Vanessa and Caldwell joined. At the breakfast table, Vanessa chatted while sipping her coffee, and their faces reflected his anxiety. First, I've been considering the possibility that if they've already located the property, they'll soon make there. Eli grimly nodded, saying that we must act now rather than waiting for them to attack. However, Eli was halted before they could finalize their strategy by the sound of a car approaching the property. Looked at Caldwell and Vanessa, his face tightening. I'll deal with this as. When Eli emerged onto the porch, a sleek black SUV appeared, throwing up dust. The driver's door opened as it came to a stop, revealing a man in a dapper suit. When he appeared, his manner was refined but icy, and his eyes were calculatingly sweeping the land. I assumed that Mr. Turner called out with a tinge of precision in his voice. Menace, this is Mr. Kane from Jora Labs, and I think you have something that is ours. Ellis's jaw tensed, but he remained calm. Siwen's lips twisted into a slight smile. But I have no idea what you're talking about. Mr. Turner, we are aware of the egg and what is hatched, so let's not play games. Eli took a step forward and handed it over from IT, so we could avoid any unpleasantness. Kane's grin disappeared as he maintained his stern position, saying, "You're trespassing. Get off my land." Swapped out for a steely stare. "Have your way, but understand that you can't defend it." Kane went back to the SUV, and Janora always gets what it wants. Drove away, shaking a chilling promise and leaving a cloud of dust in his wake. But resolute Eli went back to the house and told Vanessa and Caldwell about the encounter, saying they wouldn't let it go. Vanessa agreed when she continued, "We need help. If at all possible, it's time to involve the community." Eli grudgingly agreed that if we could show them what's actually happening, we might have a chance. In the evening, he and Caldwell went to see some reliable neighbors and carefully explained the circumstances without giving too much away. They talked extensively about Talon, including the unscrupulous actions of Jora and their attempts to take advantage of. To their amazement, the neighbors were more helpful than Eli had been in rural areas for profit. Expected that many of them have personal complaints about big businesses intruding on their livelihoods, and if you need us, we'll be there for you. One of them clearly stated that no business has the authority to take. "What's yours?" Vanessa saw Talon acting oddly at the farm. He was curious. She followed him outdoors as he paced close to the barn, his keen eyes focused on the horizon. Where he paused and gazed fixedly at a patch of ground, Vanessa said, "What is it, boy?" Talon crouched next to him and dug his strong claws into the ground. In a few minutes, he discovered a tiny metallic gadget and an electronic. Apparently, Jora had planted it at their last visit, and Vanessa's heart fell. She hurried. They'd been following him, so she returned home with the gadget in hand. Eli said, "We must act," and shattered the tracker beneath his boot. He answered quickly that they would return if they knew where he was. Vanessa had a suggestion that we can use this against them. Therefore, let's leave the tracker in a decoy site and relocate Talon to a secure area. It will buy us some time that evening as the three of them carried out their mission under the cover of darkness. Caldwell drove off to a distant location as part of their strategy, leaving the broken tracker in it. Eli and Vanessa led Talon to a thickly forested area of the abandoned barn in the meantime. They erected a temporary shelter on property distant from the house to keep their heads safe and concealed while they. Nonetheless, Talon remained near Eli since he appeared to understand the seriousness of the issue. Eli knelt next to him and put a comforting hand on his as his bright eyes scanned the area. "Feathers well past this boy. I swear." The decoy was momentarily effective. The next morning, Black SUVs swarmed and drones flew over the deserted barn. Caldwell and Vanessa observed the incident from their point of view as it developed through. With a note of relief in his voice, Caldwell stated, "Binoculars, they took the bait, but they'll quickly notice he's not there." Vanessa scowled. "So we must employ. If we can reveal their activities during this window of opportunity to collect more proof, they won't be able to be touched." Eli agreed with Talon without fear of public criticism. "So let's get to work," as they got ready for the next stage of their strategy, Eli paused to consider his relationship with watching Talon, the creature, had evolved into more than just a responsibility. He was a representation of hope and tenacity. Eli felt a wave of resolve as he playfully chased a butterfly in the clearing. "We're not simply battling." He said out loud that he stands for Vanessa and that we are fighting for everything. Smiling while standing close by, "Then let's make sure that the world knows that these days." Eli, Vanessa, and Caldwell were tense but productive after the decoy operation. Worked non-stop to strengthen their case against Jora Labs and the community support provided. Despite their newfound strength, they still faced formidable obstacles and need indisputable proof that evidence of their attempts to claim talent and of Jora's unscrupulous behavior when Vanessa was going through. She found something remarkable in the farmhouse attic, an antique leather-bound notebook that belonged to Ellis. There were thorough records and drawings of an identical egg discovered decades earlier on the same day. Grandpa. According to the notes, a creature named Rushing looked a lot like Talon, Eli, Vanessa. "You must see this." Eli took the journal downstairs and looked at it. He was aware of this, so why didn't he notify anyone? He was examining the faded handwriting. Vanessa indicated a particular section where the creature was concealed to keep it safe from people looking to take advantage of it. Rarely, she read aloud, "Skills are a gift, but they must never be categorized as." The wrong hands, and the revelation made their battle more mysterious. Talon wasn't simply. He was an exception to a tradition that the Ellis family had been keeping hidden for. In the meantime, Caldwell kept mobilizing the community's support. Called a meeting in the town hall where Eli and Vanessa told their story, making sure not to include any critical information about talent. They described how Jay's behavior endangers the farm and the larger. Eli's voice continued. "What they're doing is not only wrong, but dangerous. Steadily, yet passionately manipulating elements they don't completely comprehend." And the room was alive with whispers of agreement that the repercussions might impact everyone. An elderly farmer stood up, his face etched with the years of toil we had witnessed. "We're available if you need us. We're tired of these large corporations attempting to seize things that aren't theirs." Words strengthened Ellis' determination that the community wasn't merely understanding. They were prepared to accept action. Back at the farm, Talon's behavior became more and more intriguing. Unquestionably intelligent and perceptive, he appeared to comprehend their feelings and provide solace with a kind nudge or a musical trill, but more astonishingly, he started exhibiting skills that refused to be explained. One night, as a storm swept through Talon DD into the fields, Eli pursued while yelling for him, only to see something. As lightning crackled in the sky, Talon stood in the middle of the field, his wings spread wide, seemed to be buzzing with activity all around him, and the crops close by seemed healthier after the storm passed. Rejuvenated Vanessa, who had joined Eli, gazed in wonder that he wasn't merely an uncommon Eli. "He's amazing, Eli." I nodded, and his voice was hardly audible. "We must." Caldwell and Vanessa came up with a plan to collect concrete proof in order to defend him no matter what. Using the tracker they had disassembled and reverse-engineered against Jora Labs. Its signal to determine where it came from, the coordinates led them to a large facility tucked away in the. According to Caldwell, the woods appeared to be the location of the magic or mayhem. After presenting the map to Vanessa, The two made the decision to set up cameras and recording apparatus. They observed the lab's operations at night and recorded trucks and chili cages containing animals that had some completely changed, hauling unmarked crates out of the building while it was dark. As the team tried to reveal, Cain the cold and cunning Jorah was increasing the corporation's efforts. Drones started hovering over the farm, and the agent Eli had met was now in charge of a large-scale operation to recover Talon. There was a noticeable sense of tension as more and unmarked vehicles were seen around the property. While Caldwell set up a simple alarm system, Vanessa placed motion-activated cameras throughout the farm. Perceiving the uneasiness, Vigilant frequently positioned himself close to the farmhouse's front porch at night. Eli, who is always cool and collected, started to feel the effects of the relentless pressure, gathered himself, and began yelling at small annoyances Vanessa was always the voice of. Reason attempted to calm him, but even she found it difficult to remain calm. We must allow them to win, Eli. Talon needs us to remain strong, he murmured one evening while putting a hand on his shoulder. I don't know how long we can keep them out of Vanessa's sight, Eli muttered, stroking his hair. Talon believes in us, and the community believes in us, so we're not alone. Despite their difficulties, Talon gave us times of unadulterated happiness as well. Eli observed Talon and a group of neighborhood kids playing in the afternoon as the sun sank lower on the horizon. The kids in the field chuckled as Talon gently flapped his wings. Eli was rejuvenated by the sight of the leaves spinning in the breeze. Feeling of purpose, maintaining hope, wonder, and the relationship was more important than merely safeguarding a creature. He muttered to himself, "We're going to fight between humans and nature, more than anybody else, and we'll prevail in the conflict between Jorah and the Millers." Despite their efforts, the labs ultimately came to a head one moonlit night. Eli, Caldwell, and Vanessa were unable to predict the extent to which the corporation would go in order to take Talon. A convoy of unmarked vehicles approached the farm as it lay peacefully beneath the stars, and the sound of motors pierced the stillness. Property, with their headlights piercing the night, Eli and Vanessa were warned by the Caldwell sprang out of bed, where motion detectors had been keeping an eye on them. As soon as the cameras entered the living room, he snarled, reached for a torch, and Vanessa's heart thumped on a radio. "We must protect Talon." Eli nodded sickly. Divert their attention. Caldwell brings Talon to the barn, and Vanessa stays with him. Talon sensed the danger and split up, each going with a sense of urgency born of despair. Followed Caldwell into the barn's shadows. He was a target since his feathers shimmered slightly in the moonlight. Eli stood on the porch, shotgun in hand, even though it was dark, but he had no intention of using it. He merely wanted to gain time. The convoy stopped, and King got out of the front car, followed by a number of black-clad agents. "Mr. Miller," Cain cried out in a calm so, let's avoid making this a difficult time to give the creature to anyone. Cain grinned and said, "You have no right to be here." Eli gripped his jaw in pain. "Mr. Miller, you are concealing a biological aberration that isn't related to defending humanity." Eli shot back, keeping his ground. "Safe for you, or anyone else that's not your call." It's excellent that Cain gestured for his agents to move on the ground. However, Vanessa and Caldwell desperately tried to hide the corpse in the barn. The bird Talon stood still, his sharp eyes observing their every move, with her hand resting on his beak. Vanessa uttered comforting words. "It's okay, Talon." Caldwell, crouching close to a secret trapo in the barn floor, "We'll keep you safe," suggested that Vanessa assist him. "We can conceal him here. It's not much, but..." As they pushed Talon into the tiny area, the barn door creaked open, revealing flashlights, keeping him out of sight. Searched all over the hay-strewn floor and heard a voice barking. The two huddled in the darkness as Vanessa's breath caught and she looked at Caldwell, who put a finger to his lips. Their hearts were pounding as they heard footfall, and as one of the agents got closer to the trap, Talon gave a low, guttural sound. Before anyone could respond, the intruder was stopped in his tracks by the sound. In a show of strength, Talon appeared out of the shadows, his wings extended wide. A hay bale caused one agent to stumble backward, causing a ruckus that attracted additional agents into the barn, but Talon was prepared and kicked with a strong wing flap. Confusing his assailants with a tornado of dust and straw, Vanessa used the chance to. "We must move Caldwell," so we took his arm. The two then led Talon through Eli was running back at the house through a secret side entrance that led him to the thick woods behind the farm. With no other choice, the agents were closing in, and Kane observed the spectacle with a furious composure that you can't. Kane stepped closer and added, "Protect it forever. This isn't just about you." Eli scowled at him, saying, "You don't care about the greater good. Control is important to you." Kane signaled his men with a hand gesture when a sudden blast of. There was a spooky silence as the wind blew through the yard, swirling the leaves. Eli turned to see Talon come out of the wood shadows, his wings shining dimly in the Tal-Al moonlight, cried out sharply, his presence demanding the attention of. As the bird stood, all of the agents on the property paused, their movements slowing. Tall and commanding against the night sky, Kane exuded confidence. "Broken, what is this?" Talon moved forward, staring at Kane. The agents brandished their firearms, but Talon fluttered his instead of flinching, wings producing such a powerful gust that it knocked a number of them off their feet. Eli took advantage of the fact that he isn't dangerous unless you give him AC. Miller waved grudgingly, his face twisted with fury. "This isn't over," he told his troops to. With the sound of their motors fading into the background, the convoy retreated. Talon maintained his position till the final car vanished into the dust. After they were comfortable, Vanessa and Caldwell came out of the woods with Tal and Eli, who rushed to them with obvious relief. Caldwell shook his head as he pulled Vanessa into an embrace and added, "Gone for now." Eli's expression was grim, but they would return. Therefore, we need a strategy. He turned to Talon, who appeared unconcerned by the pandemonium, saying firmly that it would protect him. Despite their exhaustion, the group returned to the farmhouse with the determination that, although the fight was not yet ended, they had prevailed in this round, and Talon had shown that he wasn't merely a thing to be researched or. Nevertheless, he was a member of their family, and the night following the battle, they would fight for him with all of their might. Eli, Vanessa, and Caldwell sat in the living room as the raid felt heavier than before. Talon sat outside with their faces lit by the faint illumination of a solitary lamp. Despite their brief victory, the farmhouse's massive frame blended in with the barn shadows. "We can't keep waiting for Jora Labs to give up since Mill knew they wouldn't." "Assault once more," Vanessa stated in a firm voice, "that we must launch an offensive." Eli acknowledged, but explained how they have connections and money and are only a family attempting to. Caldwell leaned forward, setting a laptop on the coffee table to shield a bird. "But just any bird," he responded, bringing up satellite photos of Talon's. "We must make the most of his powers since they are as special as we have seen. He is more than just a creature. A representation of tenacity." Vanessa's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" A map of Jora Labs' offices was displayed when Caldwell clicked to open another file, exposing them to the public is aware of the unethical nature of their animal experimentation, and they will lose their power. "But how can we accomplish that?" Eli inquired. "They've done a great job of hiding their tracks." With a sly smile, Caldwell described his audacity, which is where Talon comes in. Plan, they would record Talon showcasing his remarkable skills and connect it to Caldwell's materials. The evidence of Jora Labs' illicit actions would be sufficient to incite public indignation and compel. Authorities were hesitant to look into Vanessa because they thought that highlighting Talon could turn him into a Caldwell acknowledged that larger target is a risk, but it's the only way to maintain. In the end, Eli held Vanessa's hand to keep him safe. We've gone this far if we must do this as it is the only way to stop them. Vanessa gazed at Talon's majestic physique through the window, stood up against the moonlight, seemingly understanding what they were saying. When she nodded, he said, "Let's do." The crew installed cameras in the field behind the farmhouse the following morning. Eli and Talon collaborated, encouraging him to execute some of the incredible feats they had seen throughout the weeks. Talon extended his wings wide, seemingly recognizing the significance of the moment. Vanessa captured every second of the wind gusts that rustled the trees nearby. Capturing abilities, agility, intelligence, and sheer might, he once grabbed a boulder with his talons, effortlessly lifting it, and then precisely laying it down as the practice went on. Talon gave a performance that astounded everyone, with his feathers glinting in vivid hues of. The footage was more than sufficient to demonstrate his distinctiveness, with the green and gold producing a stunning display. After securing the recording, Caldwell worked through the night to edit the video and combine it with documents that could be used against him. Vanessa and Eli took turns keeping watch over Jora Labs in the meantime, aware that the agents from the lab could return at any time, and Caldwell eventually uploaded the completed product to a safe server and got it ready for release. After it goes live, there won't be any. Eli put a hand on Caldwell's shoulder and turned around, warning him to press the button. And the film was distributed globally to animal rights organizations, news outlets, and social media platforms within. With hashtags like #SauveTalon and #EXPExposeJora trending, the video started to gather popularity within hours. Online, news outlets were overtaken by the public's instantaneous response. Picked up the article that featured proof against Jora and footage of Talon's amazing skills. Protests outside the lab's headquarters broke out, and local government was inundated with requests for investigations into the barn. But Talon was prepared and kicked with a strong wing flap, confusing his assailants with a tornado of dust and straw. Vanessa used the chance to. "We must move Caldwell," so we took his arm. The two then led Talon through a. Eli was running back at the house through a secret side entrance that led him to the thick woods behind the farm. With no other choice, the agents were closing in, and Kane observed the spectacle with a furious composure that you can't. Kane stepped closer and added, "Protect it forever. This isn't just about you." Eli scowled at him, saying, "You don't care about the greater good. Control is important to you." Kane signaled his men with a hand gesture when a sudden blast of. There was a spooky silence as the wind blew through the yard, swirling the leaves. Eli turned to see Talon come out of the wood shadows, his wings shining dimly in the Tal-Al moonlight, cried out sharply, his presence demanding the attention of. As the bird stood, all of the agents on the property paused, their movements slowing. Tall and commanding against the night sky, Kane exuded confidence. "Broken, what is this?" Talon moved forward, staring at Kane. The agents brandished their firearms, but Talon fluttered his instead of flinching, wings producing such a powerful gust that it knocked a number of them off their feet. Eli took advantage of the fact that he isn't dangerous unless you give him AC. Miller waved grudgingly, his face twisted with fury. "This isn't over," he told his troops to. With the sound of their motors fading into the background, the convoy retreated. Talon maintained his position till the final car vanished into the dust. After they were comfortable, Vanessa and Caldwell came out of the woods with Tal and Eli, who rushed to them with obvious relief. Caldwell shook his head as he pulled Vanessa into an embrace and added, "Gone for now." Eli's expression was grim, but they would return. Therefore, we need a strategy. He turned to Talon, who appeared unconcerned by the pandemonium, saying firmly that it would protect him. Despite their exhaustion, the group returned to the farmhouse with the determination that, although the fight was not yet ended, they had prevailed in this round, and Talon had shown that he wasn't merely a thing to be researched or. Nevertheless, he was a member of their family, and the night following the battle, they would fight for him with all of their might. Eli, Vanessa, and Caldwell sat in the living room as the raid felt heavier than before. Talon sat outside with their faces lit by the faint illumination of a solitary lamp. Despite their brief victory, the farmhouse's massive frame blended in with the barn shadows. "We can't keep waiting for Jora Labs to give up since Mill knew they wouldn't. Assault once more," Vanessa stated in a firm voice that we must launch an offensive. Eli acknowledged, but explained how they have connections and money and are only a family attempting to. Caldwell leaned forward, setting a laptop on the coffee table to shield a bird. "But just any bird," he responded, bringing up satellite photos of Talon's. "We must make the most of his powers since they are as special as we have seen. He is more than just a creature." A representation of tenacity. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" A map of Jora Labs' offices was displayed when Caldwell clicked to open another file, exposing them to the public is aware of the unethical nature of their animal experimentation, and they will lose their power. "But how can we accomplish that?" Eli inquired. "They've done a great job of hiding their tracks." With a sly smile, Caldwell described his audacity, which is where Talon comes in. Plan, they would record Talon showcasing his remarkable skills and connect it to Caldwell's materials. The evidence of Jora Labs' illicit actions would be sufficient to incite public indignation and compel. Authorities were hesitant to look into Vanessa because they thought that highlighting Talon could turn him into a. Caldwell acknowledged that larger target is a risk, but it's the only way to maintain. In the end, Eli held Vanessa's hand to keep him safe. "We've gone this far if. We must do this as it is the only way to stop them." Vanessa gazed at Talon's majestic physique through the window, stood up against the moonlight, seemingly understanding what they were saying. When she nodded, he said, "Let's do." The crew installed cameras in the field behind the farmhouse the following morning. Eli and Talon collaborated, encouraging him to execute some of the incredible feats they had seen throughout the weeks. Talon extended his wings wide, seemingly recognizing the significance of the moment. Vanessa captured every second of the wind gusts that rustled the trees nearby. Capturing abilities, agility, intelligence, and sheer might, he once grabbed a boulder with his talons, effortlessly lifting it, and then precisely laying it down as the practice went on. Talon gave a performance that astounded everyone, with his feathers glinting in vivid hues of. The footage was more than sufficient to demonstrate his distinctiveness, with the green and gold producing a stunning display. After securing the recording, Caldwell worked through the night to edit the video and combine it with documents that could be used against him. Vanessa and Eli took turns keeping watch over Jora Labs in the meantime, aware that the agents from the lab could return at any time, and Caldwell eventually uploaded the completed product to a safe server and got it ready for release. After it goes live, there won't be any. Eli put a hand on Caldwell's shoulder and turned around, warning him to press the button. And the film was distributed globally to animal rights organizations, news outlets, and social media platforms within. With hashtags like #SauveTalon and #DXPExposeJora trending, the video started to gather popularity within hours. Online, news outlets were overtaken by the public's instantaneous response. Picked up the article that featured proof against Jora and footage of Talon's amazing skills. Protests outside the lab's headquarters broke out, and local government was inundated with requests for investigations into the barn. But Talon was prepared and kicked with a strong wing flap, confusing his assailants with a tornado of dust and straw. Vanessa used the chance to We must move Caldwell, so we took his arm. The two then led Talon through Eli was running back at the house through a secret side entrance that led him to the thick woods behind the farm. With no other choice, the agents were closing in, and Kane observed the spectacle with a furious composure that you can't. Kane stepped closer and added, "Protected forever. This isn't just about you." Eli scowled at him, saying, "You don't care about the greater good. Control is important to you." Kane signaled his men with a hand gesture when a sudden blast of. There was a spooky silence as the wind blew through the yard, swirling the leaves. Eli turned to see Talon come out of the wood shadows, his wings shining dimly in the Tal-Al moonlight, cried out sharply, his presence demanding the attention of. As the bird stood, all of the agents on the property paused, their movements slowing. Tall and commanding against the night sky, Kane exuded confidence. "Broken, what is this?" Talon moved forward, staring at Kane. The agents brandished their firearms, but Talon fluttered his instead of flinching, wings producing such a powerful gust that it knocked a number of them off their feet. Eli took advantage of the fact that he isn't dangerous unless you give him AC. Miller waved grudgingly, his face twisted with fury. "This isn't over," he told his troops to. With the sound of their motors fading into the background, the convoy retreated. Talon maintained his position till the final car vanished into the dust. After they were comfortable, Vanessa and Caldwell came out of the woods with Tal and Eli, who rushed to them with obvious relief. Caldwell shook his head as he pulled Vanessa into an embrace and added, "Gone for now." Eli's expression was grim, but they would return. Therefore, we need a strategy. He turned to Talon, who appeared unconcerned by the pandemonium, saying firmly that it would protect him. Despite their exhaustion, the group returned to the farmhouse with the determination that, although the fight was not yet ended, they had prevailed in this round, and Talon had shown that he wasn't merely a thing to be researched or. Nevertheless, he was a member of their family, and the night following the battle, they would fight for him with all of their might. Eli, Vanessa, and Caldwell sat in the living room as the raid felt heavier than before. Talon sat outside with their faces lit by the faint illumination of a solitary lamp. Despite their brief victory, the farmhouse's massive frame blended in with the barn shadows. "We can't keep waiting for Jora Labs to give up since Mill knew they wouldn't." "Assault once more," Vanessa stated in a firm voice, "that we must launch an offensive." Eli acknowledged, but explained how they have connections and money and are only a family attempting to. Caldwell leaned forward, setting a laptop on the coffee table to shield a bird. "But just any bird," he responded, bringing up satellite photos of Talon's. "We must make the most of his powers since they are as special as we have seen. He is more than just a creature. A representation of tenacity." Vanessa's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" A map of Jora Labs' offices was displayed when Caldwell clicked to open another file, exposing them to the public is aware of the unethical nature of their animal experimentation, and they will lose their power. "But how can we accomplish that?" Eli inquired. "They've done a great job of hiding their tracks." With a sly smile, Caldwell described his audacity, which is where Talon comes in. Plan, they would record Talon showcasing his remarkable skills and connect it to Caldwell's materials. The evidence of Jora Labs' illicit actions would be sufficient to incite public indignation and compel. Authorities were hesitant to look into Vanessa because they thought that highlighting Talon could turn him into a. Caldwell acknowledged that larger target is a risk, but it's the only way to maintain. In the end, Eli held Vanessa's hand to keep him safe. "We've gone this far if. We must do this as it is the only way to stop them." Vanessa gazed at Talon's majestic physique through the window, stood up against the moonlight, seemingly understanding what they were saying. When she nodded, he said, "Let's do." The crew installed cameras in the field behind the farmhouse the following morning. Eli and Talon collaborated, encouraging him to execute some of the incredible feats they had seen throughout the weeks. Talon extended his wings wide, seemingly recognizing the significance of the moment. Vanessa captured every second of the wind gusts that rustled the trees nearby. Capturing abilities, agility, intelligence, and sheer might, he once grabbed a boulder with his talons, effortlessly lifting it, and then precisely laying it down as the practice went on. Talon gave a performance that astounded everyone, with his feathers glinting in vivid hues of. The footage was more than sufficient to demonstrate his distinctiveness, with the green and gold producing a stunning display. After securing the recording, Caldwell worked through the night to edit the video and combine it with documents that could be used against him. Vanessa and Eli took turns keeping watch over Jora Labs in the meantime, aware that the agents from the lab could return at any time, and Caldwell eventually uploaded the completed product to a safe server and got it ready for release. After it goes live, there won't be any. Eli put a hand on Caldwell's shoulder and turned around, warning him to press the button. And the film was distributed globally to animal rights organizations, news outlets, and social media platforms within. With hashtags like #SauveTalon and #DXPExposeJora trending, the video started to gather popularity within hours. Online, news outlets were overtaken by the public's instantaneous response. Picked up the article that featured proof against Jora and footage of Talon's amazing skills. Protests outside the lab's headquarters broke out, and local government was inundated with requests for investigations. Offices. But as they observed that night, the Millers' relief was fleeting. Drone lights scanning the fields, and the distinct sound of helicopters filling the air during the news report. Vanessa whispered in a tremulous voice around the farmhouse. Took out his shotgun, but he wasn't sure it would be sufficient to get Talon out of here. Caldwell indicated that he would be safer in the woods because there is a cave system close by. Vanessa and Caldwell rushed to Talon, who appeared uncomfortable, but obedient as they guided him into the bushes. Eli remained to face the oncoming. From one of the helicopters, Agents Kane appeared, backed by heavily armed. Miller screamed out to us, but Eli remained steadfast. Agents, did you think you could outsmart us? The world may be aware of what you did. Kane grinned. It's over. However, you've erred by making Talon too precious. Locate him now. Eli pointed his shotgun toward the ground, his finger hovering over the surface, regardless of where you hide him. Trigger not if I interrupt you before Kane can answer with a loud scream. Echoing through the atmosphere, Talon had returned, swooping low with his enormous wings slicing through the night sky. Talon landed next to Eli, dispersing the agents and causing Kane to flee to the safety of his aircraft. Tremendous presence that made the other agents pause for a second. A man and a bird stood. Alongside an unbeatable squad, the agents outperformed the odds, and Kane's words crackled above the helicopter's disorderly withdrawal. Loudspeaker, Miller. You will regret this when the helicopters continue to fly. Eli turned to Talon and put a hand on his beak before vanishing into the night. Caldwell and our friend Vanessa came out of the forest, their faces with a mixture of relief and shock. Vanessa asked Eli what he looked at. Talon, who remained steadfast and proud, continued to fight beside us in the surrounding air. Tension was high on the property, even as the final Jora Lab helicopters vanished into the. With his enormous wings slightly stretched, Horizon Talon stood tall, seemingly prepared to take off at any time. Caldwell, Eli, and Vanessa convened in the barn. Their triumph felt short-lived as long shadows danced across the wooden walls in the faint light. They were aware that Kane's threat was serious. We must leave, Vanessa. They'll come back, and next time, she remarked in a stern but melancholy tone. Eli agreed. You're right. But where can we? They would hesitate to destroy anything. Talon is difficult to conceal, and Caldwell was leaning against the barn door. His thoughts are racing. We need a secluded location where they can't get to us. Upstate, there is a wildlife reserve that is owned and protected. It would be ideal. By a former co-worker of mine, a conservationist who would recognize Talon's significance. Vanessa looked at Talon. Heartbreaking, but how can we get him there without drawing? It's his greatest opportunity. Caldwell gave a slight smile. But let me handle that over the course of the following few days. Caldwell put forth a lot of effort to plan their escape, and by leveraging his contacts, he was able to. In the meantime, Vanessa and Eli are in a reinforced trailer made to move huge animals. Prep the farm so that on the night of their scheduled departure, there would be no sign of Talon's presence. Departure. The family gathered in the barn Vanessa to spend one final moment with Talon. "You've been more than a miracle to us," she whispered, kneeling next to him and petting his feathers. "You've been family." Eli put a hand on her shoulder to ensure his safety, regardless of what Talon allowed. Gave a quiet scream and nuzzled Vanessa, as though realizing what she had said. The connection they had developed was unwavering, and the idea of abandoning the land made them all feel bittersweet as dawn broke. Caldwell pulled the trailer onto the main road, Eli and Vanessa in their truck trailing closely behind. The trip to the tension was high in the wildlife reserve, with every passing car and helicopter posing a threat. At one point, a black SUV matched their speed in the rearview mirror, and Ellis's heart pounded as he clutched. He said, "It's them on the steering wheel," and Vanessa grabbed her phone, prepared to call Caldwell. "What should we do before they act?" Talon screamed loudly. The SUV's driver was startled by the sound, and the trailer swerved away the road and into a ditch. The Millers looked at one another, their determination bolstered, and Talon wasn't merely a. After hours of traveling over twisting roads and thick forests, they finally arrived, and he served as their defender. Caldwell's colleague, Dr. Eleanor Bryce, welcomed them to the wildlife reserve. Eleanor's eyes met those of a seasoned conservationist with years of experience at the gate. Became wide with wonder when she saw Talon, saying, "He's amazing. He has a voice that is hardly audible beyond a whisper." Eleanor led them to a remote location, sector of the reserve that includes open fields, a freshwater area, and a large area covered in deep forest. Stream. She clarified that this would be his sanctuary and that he would be safe here, away from. When they unloaded Talon from the trailer, he opened his wings and allowed the inquisitive eyes. He stepped forward hesitantly and let out a triumphant shout that reverberated throughout the reserve. Then another before taking off, and Vanessa's eyes welled up with tears as she saw him soar over the woods. The Millers and Caldwell collaborated with Eleanor over the next few days to make sure Talon's move to the reserve was smooth. They kept an eye on his behavior, fed him, and let him gradually become used to his new setting. One evening when they observed Talon sitting atop a rocky crag, Eleanor turned to Eli. "You've accomplished something amazing here, both in terms of talent and conservation." Eli nodded. "My story will inspire countless others with his efforts everywhere." His chest swelled with pride. It wasn't easy, but Vanessa, it was worth it. Furthermore, he is more than just a unique creature. He is a representation of tenacity and what it takes to stand up for what. The Millers knew that Jora Labs wouldn't give up lightly. Caldwell, even though they found serenity in the reserve. He worked through the night on a strategy to further expose the group, gathering more proof and organizing assistance from environmental organizations and reporters Eli and Vanessa in the interim. Concentrating on starting over, they kept near the reserve, paying Talon frequent visits and making sure he stayed safe. Every visit served as a reminder of the path they had traveled and the inner strength they had found. Talon flourished in his new surroundings as the weeks stretched into months. Other animals were drawn to his majestic presence, and he quickly became the focal point of a flourishing environment. Eleanor kept track of his development, her study yielding priceless insights for the Millers-Talon's journey regarding the preservation and care of endangered animals. Was evidence of the strength of hope and perseverance. Against overwhelming odds, the Millers stood on the brink of a fresh future for a creature that had permanently altered their life. The wildlife reserve silhouettes soared across the woodland as the setting sun shed a golden glow over it. They had been accustomed to seeing the horizon's wings cut through the air with effortless grace. Eli, who was used to yet never stopped marveling at a living example of their tenacity and affection, observed Talon. With a mix of pride and amazement, he said that he was more than a creature. His passionate voice serves as a reminder of what it means to persevere when the chances are against you. Talon, Vanessa, who was stacked against you, nodded while dabbing at a tear. Taught us to stand up for our convictions no matter how unattainable they may appear. He is as much a member of our family as. Dr. Eleanor Bryce watched the family from a distance as we heard his story, grinning knowingly. Done something remarkable, she added, adding that the Talon story is already generating. He represents hope for species that are assumed to be extinct in conservation circles. Ecosystems at danger of collapsing. And for those who must have faith in miracles, the news of Talon's safe transfer. And the Millers' conflict with Jora Labs had started to disseminate. Caldwell's ceaseless attempts to reveal had produced results, and journalists and activists from conservation organizations gathered around the tale, spreading the idea that every animal, no matter how uncommon, should have the opportunity to flourish on the farm after it had been struggling. Visitors flocked to hear the Miller story, which was inspired by their bravery, and Enterprise became a hub for change and perseverance. Some contributed money, while others offered their time to assist with reconstruction. Eli and Vanessa transformed the property into a refuge for displaced and endangered animals. Local community to develop educational initiatives that teach both adults and children the value of environmental stewardship and biodiversity. Talon's narrative became a pillar of their purpose, a striking. Talon had not received a reminder at the reserve of how all life is intertwined. Eleanor's studies revealed that he not only adapted but flourished, making contributions to the local environment that no one else could. Had expected that his presence would draw additional animals, causing a chain reaction that restored the region, with tiny creatures and birds nesting in the trees Talon preferred. Sought refuge close to his selected purchase on a day that will never be forgotten. Eleanor found that Talon had started building a nest high in the cliffs of the reserve, indicating that he had completely accepted his new surroundings, which gave the Millers a great sense of achievement because he has found his home. As they watched him gently tuck twigs into his nest, Vanessa murmured, "He's finally home." Months later, Eli and Vanessa welcomed a baby daughter, whom they called Hope, into their family. Moniker was an homage to the path they had traveled and the knowledge they had gained. Oliver is now the inquisitive and intelligent toddler was overjoyed to be a big brother, and his laughter filled the. Talon remained a constant in his world of love and wonder while playing with his parents. Even though he was now living in the wild, he seemed to sense their presence when the Millers came to the reserve, frequently soaring down to welcome them with a loud cry, demonstrating his closeness to the family. Constructed under the most improbable conditions, remained intact one evening when the family sat. Eli turned to Vanessa over a campfire at the reserve. "Do you ever consider how it seems like a lifetime ago, Vanessa, when everyone began that enormous egg in the field?" Talon grinned, her eyes sparkling in the firelight. "It was the start of something we could never have predicted that impacted our lives in ways we're still learning about. He reminded us, gave us a purpose, and strengthened our bonds as a family." Eleanor, who was sitting close by and holding a notebook, added her thoughts on the strength of hope. And he has accomplished more. His tale is motivating conservation initiatives. People all throughout the world are realizing how important it is to preserve our planet and its inhabitants. Caldwell held up a mug of coffee in honor of Talon's tenacity, and the miller's tale of hope continued to motivate future generations as the stars appeared in the night sky and the fires flared. When millers considered the path that had led them to this point, they realized that the difficulties were not yet done. Will always be conflicts to resolve and causes to support, but they also understood that they were. Talon's wail reverberated, stronger now, bound together by their common experiences and the love that had sustained them, that a wild yet familiar sound reverberated across the night, reminding them of the amazing bond they had established and the amazing journey they had traveled. They were extremely appreciative of the difficulties that had molded them for the future as they looked up at the sky. The millers had discovered more than simply the miracles that kept them alive and the hope that kept them moving forward. In that field, they had discovered a legacy, a purpose, and an endless future. Possibilities. I appreciate you watching the entire video. If you enjoy it, please like and subscribe the channel for additional such stuff.